Hello, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. I just send you, each and every one of you, loads of love. I'm doing absolutely fabulous, and just to show off, I'm having a glass of elderberry cordial with lemonade because you guys are so incredibly exotic, I have to compete. So before we get started, don't forget to get that quintessential drink because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Meryl Fletcher and I'm from Toronto, where I live in an attractive high-rise apartment block in downtown Core, south of Bloor Street. And my extraordinary story that ultimately led to my phenomenal idiosyncratic Bigfoot encounter happened in October of 2003, when I was 23 years old, and only a few months away from being married to my fiancé Carl. Growing up, I had 4 very close-knit friends, Sally, Rebecca, Madison and Louise, and we had interacted with each other when we were still in diapers and attended the same schools together, and had grown incredibly close over the years, and considered each other to be more like family than friends. I had decided I wanted to do something sur genre, or extra special if you like, with my friends for my hen party, and so I booked a pretty little cabin in a remote part of Roberta's panoramic and resplendent Rocky Mountains, as this idea had always been something that I'd wanted to do. I've always adored nature, crackling fires, and romantic log cabins. Of course, when I did tell my friends about where we would be spending my hen party, I could detect an enthusiastic rise followed by a very sizable fall in their voices, which they had tried to mask, but I was not easily fooled. I could tell they were bitterly disappointed. I think they thought I was going to whisk them off to Las Vegas, where we would be spending our evenings walking down the glamorous Strip, the central artery of Sin City, if you like, where you find all the gambling joints, restaurant bars and shopping malls, and could enjoy the fountain display at the Bellagio. I'm sure they secretly hoped I would book a suite for 3 nights at the exclusive Waldorf Astoria for lots of daily pampering, and that we would enjoy our nights spent drinking up a storm, dancing the night away and even gambling, or of course watching the paranormal mind-reading magic show at balls in Las Vegas. "Why a cabin?" asked Madison, sounding so flat and downhearted over the telephone, as if I'd told her that someone had just died. "I thought you were planning to do something, well, you know, more festive and extraordinaire, shall we say." "I know it sounds lame," I said, "but I truly think a cabin in Alberta, surrounded by exquisite countryside, will be remarkably special. It's something I've always wanted to do, and never ever got round to it. There's no time like the present, especially with the 4 of my very best friends." "But why a cabin in Alberta?" came Madison's perturbed voice. "Because," I said, "it'll be fun. We could go for hikes in the countryside, exploring the woods, and enjoying barbecues in the middle of nowhere." Madison let out a huge groan. As if the idea of my hen party was about as desirable as a piece of dog turd that she'd discovered on her patio floor. "I never thought I'd say this, Meryl, but your idea is simply weird. I'm not going to pretend it appeals to me at all, because it most certainly doesn't. I personally would much prefer to be pampered within an inch of my life at the Bellagio than doing anything that involves hard work. Getting sweaty, dirty and exhausted from trekking laboriously uphill in my walking boots. I hardly fancy that. I would so much prefer to get sweaty on the dance floor and get tipsy drinking lots of stunning sparkling champagne, rather than walking up some arduous mountain slopes. "Well, it's my hen party," I said, "so I'm calling the shots. You'll have your turn next, and if you want to fly us to the moon, well, then it'll be your call." And so there we were, all 5 of us, driving down this pretty rugged, precipitous country road in Alberta, quite literally in the middle of nowhere. It was during the fall, with moderately warm, dry daytime temperatures and very chilly evenings. The scenery was utterly spectacular, and I noticed that my less than enamoured friends were considerably more upbeat and sanguine. The long, windy roads were surrounded by mountainous elevations, clustered with the exquisite deep reds and yellows of the sub-supine larch and aspen trees, mixed in with the rich evergreen foliage of the coniferous trees, along with the backdrop of glaciers and mountains, which was exquisitely beautiful. You have to admit it, girls. Whatever you may have said about Meryl's idea for a hen party, said Sally, this place is drop-dead gorgeous, and the scenery just blows my mind. It's spectacular. Everyone heartily agreed that the scenery was indeed out of this world, and I could feel the energy in the car lift, much like a pendulum swinging in the opposite direction, as if my friends had suddenly become much more animated and enthusiastic about our little weekend escape, and were all chattering away excitedly to themselves. Before long, our Land Rover Discovery was winding down another rocky road, where the pebbles were beating viciously under the belly of the vehicle, despite it being a four-wheel drive, causing those unpleasant, precarious wobbles and jilts you invariably experience on uneven terrain, and of course on a rugged road like this. Finally, we found our way to the enchanting little cabin that really was stuck in the middle of nowhere, in a pretty small clearing, surrounded by opulent-looking forest that was ablaze with trees wearing their leafy, resplendent, rich garments of vintage golds and reds that you would only ever expect to find in a king's palace, for that was how magnificent it was. The right-hand side of the cabin stretched out into a wide, open, flowery prairie where a couple of horses were grazing. The utopian, wholesome-looking cabin was very old and rustic, and at one time had been a miner's cabin that had been built in the early 1800s, but maintenance over the years had brought it up to speed, and it had some modern additions to it, like a generous-sized wooden wraparound deck and larger windows. The inside of the well-appointed cabin boasted 3 small, sumptuously decorated bedrooms, a single standard bathroom, a tiny but very efficient modern kitchen, and a sizable living area that opened out into a magnificent porch. Pride of place in the living area was the largest, most incredible fireplace that I've ever seen, and I can't even use the words to describe how magnificent it was. No attention to detail had been spared, as the place had been luxuriously decorated with only comfort in mind, with cosy couches covered with colourful plumped-up cushions and large walnut bookshelves with shelves bursting with interesting books, some that looked very old. While on the walls there was a vast selection of blown-up mining photographs of people in the 1800s, and I tell you it enhanced the historic charm and appeal of the sumptuous and tranquil idyllic abode, almost as if you were stepping back in time. It did not take us long to unpack and to get the fire crackling away happily in the grate, as there was a stack of firewood prepared for us around the back of the cabin for easy accessibility and convenience. It had been a warm, dry day, but there was now a very distinctive chill in the air, and so a fire was a prerequisite for this cosy night, and we were all looking forward to roasting marshmallows over the open flames later on, and drinking warm cups of hot chocolate before finally retiring to the cosiest beds you've ever seen, fitted with luxury linens. All of a sudden there was an ominous knock at the cabin door, and I opened it to see a hillbilly standing there, who was tall and lean, and probably in his early 40s, with a receding hairline and a faint glimmer of a moustache above his lips. He was smiling at me with a toothless grin, and a very stupid look on his face, and wearing dishevelled, unkempt clothes that looked as if he'd been sleeping in them, and he didn't smell great either. A mixture of whiskey and sweat comes to mind, that I discerned on his breath. "Hello, can I help you?" I asked the shabby, disagreeable-looking man, feeling a nasty chill going down my spine, as he was leering at me inappropriately and surveying me much like a vulture that scans its prey with a ravenous, dark pair of eyes. "I'm the caretaker," he said. "Just checking to see if you've settled in all right." "We've settled in fine, thank you very much," I said, trying to close the door on him fast, but the awful cretin promptly blocked it with his large boot. But by this time my friends had gathered around me to see what on earth was going on. "Yes?" I said, glancing down at the man's muddy boot. "Anything else?" "Yeah, I wanted to say, I hope you have a good time," said the man, showing me a mouthful of gums with a couple of wobbly yellow teeth still stuck in their hollows that looked suspiciously loose. "Thank you," I said immediately, closing the door behind me. "What a creep!" piped Louise. "That dimwit gave me the chills. Did you see the way he looked at us? We must make sure to keep the doors locked at night. I don't feel comfortable with him loitering around. There's something really off about him, like he's not completely compos mentos, if you know what I mean." "He says he's the caretaker," I said. "For this place," said Louise, shaking her head doubtfully. "Something's not right there." I'm glad to say that for the first couple of days and nights spent at our cabin, they flowed seamlessly, without a single hitch, with the exception, of course, of that sinister, ambiguous moron that would make an appearance from time to time at our door, with the pathetic, futile excuse that he was checking in on us. He would put us on edge, especially when he grinned at us, as his smile was disturbingly menacing. It didn't help that he didn't have any teeth. I noticed that he always looked at us with these very unsettling, rather bone-chilling predatory eyes, almost as if we were his prey, and he was sizing us up. Another part of me firmly disliked the extreme interest he appeared to be showing us that really did ruffle my feathers. There was a part of me that sensed he was not right in the head, almost as if he was a simpleton or ignoramus with the intelligence of a gnat, if you like. Apart from that, everything had been fabulous for the five of us, and we were having a remarkable, wonderful time, as we'd enjoyed hiking adventures, a spot of fishing by the lake, and delicious barbecues over the fire pit with the most tender, succulent, juicy meat, as I'd gone out of a limb to stock our fridge with the finest cheeses, vegetables and quality foods that you can buy. We had relished the special moments drinking glasses of delicious white wine by a crackling fire, reliving nostalgic memories from our childhoods, and I would go so far as to say that my friends were seriously beginning to believe that this holiday in the cabin was not half so bad after all. "You know what?" said Sally, curling her legs up comfortably on the sofa and taking a sip of hot chocolate from her mug, on the last and final night of our holiday. We were all sitting by a crackling fire, and it was beginning to get late. "I've really been enjoying myself, girls. I'm not going to kid. I truly fancied a hen party in Vegas, but in a strange, rather peculiar way, I think that this adventure, here in the cabin, has certainly trumped Vegas for me." "In what way?" I asked, feeling secretly very pumped up by this revelation. "I don't know," said Sally reflectively. "It's just we've not had such good open chats for a long time together like this. We've been able to relax and let our hair down and talk and talk and talk, and it's been great." "Please don't keep talking as if our holidays are already over," said Madison. "I'm enjoying myself here. I don't want to be reminded of Toronto while I'm unwinding. Thank you very much." All of a sudden we heard a rap at the door, and we groaned because we knew who it was. "Oh no, it's that moron again." "Yes," I said, opening the door, closing it tightly to my body so that the hillbilly only got to see my head poking out. "Just checking to see whether you've enjoyed your stay here." "Yes, thank you very much," I said. "So you'll be leaving in the afternoon tomorrow," he said, giving me a chilling, toothless grin that gave me the creeps. "That's right," I said, slamming the door shut and returning to the settee around the open fire. "What a creep," I said, taking a large sip of white wine. "Look at me," I said, lifting up my sleeves of my PJs. "I've broken out in goosebumps all over my body. I don't know why, but it happens every time when I open the door to that obnoxious half-wit. It's something about him. It sets my nerves on edge. It's the way he looks at you through those vulture-like eyes, almost like he wants to devour your flesh. I know it sounds silly, but he really, really does freak me out." "Oh, don't talk like that," piped Madison, her eyes growing anxious. "You'll give me nightmares tonight. I won't be able to get to sleep." That night, when we returned to bed, we were awoken to a loud, terrifying rapping on our door. Madison came running into the bedroom, clutching her gown over her body in anguish. She looked terrified and very discomposed. "It's the caretaker," she whispered. "I wasn't able to sleep tonight, and I heard his footsteps. He's carrying an axe in his hand, and I'm not joking either. What are we going to do?" "Well, maybe he's cutting firewood," suggested Sally. "What? In the middle of the night?" I said. "Are you kidding, Sally? Are you being for real?" "No, something's not right about this," I said. No one comes to the door at 2 o'clock in the morning with an axe in their hand. They clearly have a nefarious agenda in mind. I told you, that man is super weird. The rapping continued. And it was beginning to freak us out. And to make matters worse, we didn't have a telephone. All of a sudden we could hear the moron's voice shouting, "Let me in! Let me in!" "What do you want?" I said, speaking from the inside of the cabin. "We're trying to sleep. We don't appreciate being so rudely woken up in the middle of the night. Bog off." "I want you to let me in now," said the man. "I need to talk to you." "Not at 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't," I shouted. "Good night." At that, the man promptly began bashing indignantly at the wooden rafters and slashing them with the axe, and began screaming like a banshee, "Let me in! Let me in! Let me in!" My friends and I stared at each other with wide, terrified eyes, and 2 of us were crying. We were so appalled by the banging sounds, and the axe was thrashing violently against the wood. It was very discomposing. "He's going to kill us," cried Madison. "I know he is. He can easily get in here, as he only needs to break down the shatterproof windows, and that won't be too hard." At that revelation, I became very angst. "What are we going to do?" I cried in terror. "How can we protect ourselves from an axe?" "Knives," said Sally, and with that we ran to the kitchen to remove chopping knives from the drawer, which we dispersed among ourselves very quickly, trembling nervously, not very confident that our silly little weapons would be of much use against an axe. "Please tell me this is a dream," said Madison, looking at me through wide, petrified eyes. "Are we about to be killed by that horrible, horrible hillbilly? Who the heck is he?" she trembled. "You mark my words, he's no caretaker. Suppose he's an escaped convict, wanted for murdering his entire family. For goodness sake, Madison, don't scare us like that. It's bad enough that we're in this trouble." It would seem that Madison's ominous words hung in the air like an odorous, repugnant smell that we refused to acknowledge because it was too terrifying for words. All of a sudden, the floor-to-ceiling shatterproof windows of the porch were being quite literally hacked through by an axe, and it wouldn't be long before this villainous man entered the cabin. We could not run to our Land Rover because it was parked in the front of the cabin, but if we escaped through the back door and ran through the wooded area, there was a very good chance we could hide somewhere. We quickly opened the kitchen door and were hit hard by the cool, biting chill of an easterly wind, but we didn't care. That was the least of our troubles. We needed to get away, or we were almost certainly dead. Of that we were in no doubt. We ran in terror for our lives, with hearts exploding with trepidation and dread, still dressed in our pyjamas and our slippers. We suddenly realised that the hillbilly was onto us, and he was pursuing us, running with that horrifying axe in his hands. I've never known a moment when my body was so driven by such a discomposing, indescribable terror that is quite impossible to explain, but I could feel the heat of a powerful adrenaline surge course through my veins like a rocket, which seemed to increase the speed of my running. I could feel the rapid vibration of my heart thundering through my chest, and my breathing was rapid and intense. I did not even realise it, but I was screaming at the top of my lungs, and looking back, I never knew I was capable of screaming like that. If I was back in Seattle, I'm in no doubt that I would have woken up the entire neighbourhood for miles around, but here it was only foxes, coyotes and deer that were likely to hear my desperate and anguished cries. Suddenly my less than appropriate satin slippers caused me to slip, and I was tripped up by an obtrusive jagged stone, and I fell backwards onto the ground and struggled to get up quickly, and I began to scream as the man's hands were now grabbing my pyjamas. "Get off me!" I screamed. "Get off me! Leave me alone! Get off me! Go away!" I sat squatting him as if he was a fly or some kind of nasty bug. The man pushed me down on the ground, and I could hear the background screams of my petrified friends as they realised I'd been caught by this horrifying nutter, and it wasn't difficult to imagine what was about to happen next. I had seen so many horror movies by now to know what my outcome would be. Being a spectator is one thing, like you are on the movies, but being in the eye of the storm and becoming the victim is not a job for the faint-hearted. Madison, one of my friends, ran forwards and aimed a large rock at the man to stop him from lashing out at me with his axe. "Don't you hurt my friend," screamed Madison. "Don't you dare hurt her, or I will kill you myself, and don't think I don't mean it." The toothless man was grinning from ear to ear, relishing in the heightened terror and drama that he was causing. He was glancing at Madison and then at me, in the throes of deciding of whether to drop me and run after Madison or not. It was in that moment that something so incomprehensible happened, and the only way I can describe it is like a very deep, weighty boom, boom, boom that caused the whole forest to shake, almost like something massively big was bolting and thundering through the woods towards us at the speed of a rocket. And that was when we saw him. In that second, the hands of time stood ominously still, because I was staring at a creature that even the most imaginative books of fiction would never ever be able to conjure up or even create. This monstrously huge creature that looked to be a man with ape-like influences stood before us, towering at least 9 foot tall and 3 foot wide across the shoulder area, and his pyramid-shaped head seamlessly flowed into his shoulders with no evidence of a neck. His body was so powerful, strong, sinewy and burly, especially around the upper chest area, and he had long arms that tapered to below the knees, and very powerful short legs. I noticed his body was covered with very black 4-inch hair that was shiny and very healthy looking, and I never detected any body odour on the creature, as all I could smell was the woody notes of pine. I noted that the face on this creature was very human, with a very wide, flat nose, a sloped, furrowed forehead, and a thin mouth. It would seem that all the screaming stopped in the woods, and I could hear the sound of the hillbilly's axe fall to the ground with an almighty thud, as I imagine the shock of seeing this outlandish creature had loosened his grip on the axe. I could see the elated expression on his face had dissipated like a fine mist and turned to terror, because it was clear that the deep-set eyes of this imposing, intimidating creature exhibited a menacing red eyeshine, and they were pinned directly on him. I could tell by the intelligent, discerning look in the creature's eyes that he knew exactly what was going on, and he wasn't happy about it, not one little bit at all. He was giving off the energy of a large, protective lion defending his pride. As strange as it sounds, I just knew that this outlandish creature had come to our rescue in response to our terrified screams. So I just stared at him in awe, drinking in every ounce of him, like a picture at the Tate Art Gallery that you never ever want to forget. So I tried to memorize every last detail of this remarkable, lofty, majestic and incongruous beast. The critter curled back his lips to reveal large, white, human-like teeth, and he began to growl so ferociously it was exactly like being in the intimidating, majestic and sovereign presence of a lion. The creature grabbed the hillbilly and threw him over his shoulders, holding him down so effortlessly with one powerful hand, and that despite all the wiggles and frantic screams of the man, he could not escape the critter's powerful clutches. In fact, on the creature's sizable, powerfully built, hefty back, he looked pathetic and puny, like a silly doll of some kind. The creature turned to look directly at me, to see if I was all right, and I saw he had the most beautiful eyes that I've ever seen. And I still talk about those eyes today, for they were indeed the eyes of an angel, kind, protective, caring, and exceedingly loving. I could see this clearly as the moonlight was excellent on this occasion, so I imagine it must have been a full moon, but I cannot say that I noticed for sure. The critter then turned around and virtually glided away, carrying the odious wretch on his back like a sack of potatoes, until he was gone from our sight. I don't know what his intentions actually were with that despicable man, but I don't even care. I was out of harm's way, and so were my friends, and in that moment, that was all that mattered. My friends and I quickly tore out of the forest, still pumped with adrenaline, at a speed that we have never ever been able to since replicate, whilst in our pyjamas. We then thrust our essentials into the Rover so fast, and we drove away, bypassing the police station and everything else, because all we cared about was getting back home to Toronto, as indeed nothing else mattered as far as we were concerned. When I got back to Toronto, I did phone the Alberta police to tell them that I believe the caretaker of the cabin had tried to kill us, but we had managed to escape. But I made no mention of the outlandish creature that we had encountered. I instinctively knew mentioning such an enigmatic creature would hardly make me sound like a credible witness. The police phoned me later to say that there had been a thorough search of the cabin and the surrounding area, and there was no sign of the mystery man. And we were informed that there was no caretaker at the cabin ever, at any stage. "You must have been terrified," said the policeman sympathetically. "You left half your stuff at the cabin. Would you like us to post it back to you?" "It's not necessary," I said. "Just give it all to charity." It was 3 weeks later when my girlfriends and I finally got together for a lunch in Toronto. And naturally, the first thing we all said is, "What in God's name was that incredible creature that came to our miraculous rescue?" But none of us at that stage knew the answer to that extraordinary question. Of course, now we know it was a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or Yeti, if you like. But all these years later, we still hold this king of the forest in exceedingly high regard. "I've never been so terrified in all my life," said Madison, putting her hand on mine. "I thought that horrible man was going to hack you to death." "Oh, I know he was," I said, taking a large gulp of wine to compose myself, for indeed even the mere memory was making me shake. "You know," said Sally, "I've always thought terrifying scenes like this, with demented, deranged axemen, belonged in horror movies. And as for that creature, it certainly belongs in the pages of pulp fiction, not in our reality. Never in my wildest imaginings did I ever expect us to witness something so outlandish in our reality." "But it was real," piped Rebecca. "Even though it was terrifying in its appearance, I knew it had come to our rescue. I sensed it." We all agreed to that. "What did you suppose happened to the so-called caretaker?" I asked. "I'm not sure," said Rebecca, "but if that creature left him dead, I don't care, because a man like that should not be left wandering around. He's certifiable and exceedingly dangerous." "Well, I've been in touch with the Alberta police, and no one has reported any sightings of the thug." "I have to concede," said Sally, raising her glass. "I somehow think Merrill," she said, looking at me with bright, sparkling eyes, "has eclipsed the all of us, because when it comes to our hen parties in the future, they will definitely not be as memorable as yours was. No one will ever forget the week that we spent at the cabin with you. How shall I describe it? Fun, exciting, adventurous, memorable, beautiful, and completely, utterly, and totally terrifying. Now that is impossible to beat." Of course, she was exactly right about that, because whenever we did meet up on future dates, and even today, it's always my hen party that we talk about, whilst all the other hen parties are almost certainly long since forgotten. So there you are. That's my story. Oh, what a fantastic, fantastic story. I just can't thank you enough for it. What a beautiful story. And don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, goodbye and good night.